I think we're live. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We do have, or we typically give it a couple of minutes for some stragglers coming in from their busy days. So we'll kick off in about 30 seconds. In the meantime, you have the utmost pleasure of watching David Holmes drink his tea at 3 o'clock in the morning from sunny London. So lap that up while you can, and we'll kick everything off in about 30 seconds.
Hello, everybody. It is sunny London. Today, ironically, it was sunny. So, although we also had a thunderstorm and rain. That's the UK.
Sounds like typical UK weather.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure, I think we have people joining from all around the country today, but I've been locked inside all day actually, but I'd say it's 24 degrees, a little hazy in Sydney, but no thunderstorms on the horizon as yet.
Yes, starting to warm up in Melbourne as well, slowly but surely, getting some sunlight these days.
Warming up is relative, I imagine.
Yeah. Now we're past 0 degrees. We're at 1 now.
It's impressive in the positives. Fahrenheit or?
Of course.
Okay, fantastic. I think we're good to go. It's now 12:32, so I hope everyone's had time. Of course, we will be getting a recording after this, so if you have missed the first couple of minutes of weather chat, everyone loves weather chat. You will have a chance to catch up on that. But thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. My name is Joshua Gerard. I'm the National Inside Sales Leader here at Centaur, so we really appreciate you making the time to jump in here, and we hope it's worthwhile. As you can see on the screen, the concept of today's webinar is between two chairs, which basically does what it says on the tin. So you're certainly not here to learn from me today or to get input from me today. It's designed to be a conversation between two dentists. And to that end, we have Dr. Dish and Dr. David on the line now, who we'll introduce shortly. The topic of today's conversation is patient communication. So we'll dive into what that means, and obviously we'll get the feel of it as we go. Just before we do, and before I introduce Dave and Dish, a couple of little bits of housekeeping. We want to encourage as much participation as we can to give some food for thought to the guys around how they can provide feedback and structure the conversation. So there will be a couple of polls going up today. Please interact with those and let us know your answers to the questions that we ask. There'll be 3 polls in total, so it's not going to be too heavy. At any point, if you do want to ask questions, there is a Q&A section. So if you have a little bit of a fiddle around on your Zoom menu, you'll find the Q&A section. If you struggle with that, please feel free to chuck them in the chat as well. We'll get to some at the end of the webinar, perhaps as we go, but every question will be answered, even if it's followed up after the webinar as well. Fantastic. So look, we're going to be pretty slide. There's a slide up now, but we're going to be pretty slide light today. It is a conversation between our 2 experts here that we have. So we'll chuck up maybe some summary slides as we go, just in case people want to take photos. But if you request those after, more than happy to send the content through as well. But enough from me. We'll get to certainly the stars of the show here and introduce Dr. Dave and Dr. Dish. Dr. Dave, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and why you're here today?
Sure, Josh. Yeah, so thank you. I'm a dentist, Australian, grew up in Sydney, did my undergraduate at Sydney University, and then went to the US and did a Master of Science and an implant program at New York University before moving to London and realizing that my calling in life was more about being an entrepreneur and solving big problems than being a researcher and I guess I still am a specialist implantologist, if I can call myself that, and I still practice a day or 2 a week. But I realized my real calling was about solving big problems and being more entrepreneurial. And founded FollowApp.Care almost 10 years ago now. I think we might get to the founding story later on, but and now live and work in London, and that's me.
Awesome. Dish?
So yeah, my name's Dr. Dish. I'm a dentist, a practice owner, and recently a communications coach as well. My story is a little different. So I graduated from the University of Otago in New Zealand at the end of 2018. Pretty much 3 months into working, I decided to jump straight into practice ownership. So I bought my first clinic 3 months after graduating, and thankfully we were able to grow that clinic quite quickly. So in 2021, I bought my second clinic, and now, as of 3 months ago, we're on to the third clinic. And I think the reason why I'm so excited about this webinar and about this topic, and I was super eager to be involved, is that the ideas that we're going to discuss and the strategies that we're going to talk about today is probably the reason why we were able to grow the clinic so quickly. So I'm really excited to, jump into it.
Exciting. Thanks, guys. And Dish, you're outnumbered 2 redheads to 1, I've just realized on this call, which the rarity on a webinar, but yet another treat for the audience. Fantastic. Well, I've gone a little bit early on that slide there, but I suppose, Dish, do you want to maybe introduce, we've said we're going to talk about patient communication today. Do you want to, I guess, give us or take us into a little bit more detail about what that means or what we're going to talk about today, perhaps starting with what you view the patient journey as?
Yeah, absolutely. I found that one of the most, if not the most important factor when it comes to the success of a dental clinic is the patient experience. A patient who has a good experience will always come back. They're going to come back with their families, they're going to come back with their friends, they're going to talk about you, and they're going to give you reviews. And at the end of the day, as both a dentist and an owner, that's really what we want. So I think one of the key factors or values in a dental clinic that I've had, especially from the start, has been an obsession with making sure you're fostering and nurturing and protecting the patient experience. But the issue is, patient experience is quite a broad term. It's an umbrella term. It's very difficult to understand exactly what that means. So it's like, all right, we need to, make sure the patient experience is good, but where do we start? So the way that I thought about the patient experience is I broke it down into steps. I thought about it in the framework of a patient journey. So, when a patient attends your clinics, they go through a journey. And as owners, it's our job to ensure that we exceed the patient's expectations at each of the touch points. So I think Sean, Josh, that slide that you had up there would be really good because that kind of takes us through those exact touch points. So, the first one would be the online presence. That's the website, that's your social media, that's your Google reviews. And, this is what the patients see when they try and find you online. After they find you, they will give you a call. So that's the first phone call. It's important to make sure that you're not missing any of these calls and you make sure that your receptionist knows what they're saying. After that first phone call goes well, you have, the welcome into the reception. How does your clinic look? How does it present? How are your staff members? What kind of environment do you offer? And then you have the dentist-patient interaction. We need to make sure that the dentist is interacting with the patient beautifully from the very first greeting all the way to the end. And then finally, we have the last step, which is the follow-up. It's like, how does your team, after the appointment, follow up with patients? And what I've found is that, most practices focus all of their energy and all of their attention on the earlier parts of this journey. They put so much into making sure that their online presence is good, but as they go further and further down this journey, they put less and less importance and emphasis. And by the time we get to follow up, people aren't doing it. Clinics are hardly doing it. And I think that this is a real problem in the dentistry, industry, and it's a major gap in the industry, and it's a major gap in the patient journey, because it's something that can really devalue the patient experience. And I cannot stress the importance of the follow-up. And the reason I'm harping on about this is because it's definitely been one of the biggest needle movers in my business. What do you think, David?
No, look, Dr. Dish, I think you've done a great job summarizing the main steps of the patient journey. The only thought that I have as you were speaking is that, so I still run a practice with my wife, and it just never ceases to amaze me how each one of these steps is just so important. So if you have great online presence, but you've got a bad front of house who's not answering the phone and taking new patients through a nice process, then you're going to be wasting your money with your online presence, and your Google reviews, et cetera, are going to be wasted. Likewise, if when they're coming into the reception, it's not a friendly face and people aren't doing things in a coordinated manner, it's just just like you said, Dr. Dish, each one of these steps is just so important. And I think you're right. The follow-up system is probably the afterthought, except for those high value cases where we pick up the phone and we call the patient, because we know that that's value. We know that patients love hearing from the dentist directly. And I remember particularly when I first started my career, I used to do that a lot. And really, that's where we've stepped in with follow-up, is what actually, if we unpick that problem, what does it cause by missing that follow-up step? What other problems come out of missing that step in the journey? And really, the problems are actually quite serious, not only for the business but potentially for the patient in terms of complications, and for you as a dentist if the patient has a problem and you haven't documented that you've checked on them to make sure they're okay. So, or conversely, by doing that, that helps. So, yeah, look, these are the main steps. There's nothing missed there.
I do really think that, it's important for people to realize that, as clinicians and as owners, I don't really think that our duty of care should end just because the patient has walked out the door. That's what's so important about this follow-up step. If you own a practice and you're a good clinician, part of delivering a really high quality service to your patients, and part of running a high-end clinic is being there for the patient, not just during the appointment itself, but also after they leave. So it's, and as you said, David, if you don't do this step, you're missing out on a really, really important part of the patient journey, and you open yourself up to a whole host of problems. I think one of the next things that we'll talk about is that some of the problems that both you and I have definitely faced, and I'm sure that everyone here will be able to relate to some of these.
There's one last thought just before we do that, is that dentist-patient interaction step. I think as dentists, and I don't know, is our audience, Josh, a mix of owners, dentists?
Yeah, we have a mix. We typically have a mix. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but for the dentists who are here, that's where we spend 99% of our time, really trying to understand, how can we speak better? How can we understand the patients? How can we do active listening? I don't know about everyone on the webinar, but I've been to many, many seminars about that. And it seems to be something that you just have to constantly keep working on and improving. And so I think it's understandable we don't have time to think about all of these steps. And that's where automation and technology can really support us and help with make our lives easier, essentially. So I think the one last thought is that dentist-patient interaction that can blow up into 100 different lines underneath, and that's where we spend a lot of time as dentists. And when you're a dentist owner, you don't have time to do everything else. So automation is the key. But yes, so let's move on to what are the problems that a lack of follow-up can cause. Dish, I think that's a good move.
Yeah.
Awesome. But before we, sorry, Dish, before we do, I suppose this is one point where we want to get a little bit of feedback, and we might, because you guys have identified this as a really common missing piece. Let's go ahead and put our we're really we're eager to understand, I guess, what people are doing at the moment. How do you follow up? How often do you do it? We've got a few answers on the screen there. If you do click other, feel free to chuck something in the chat or in the Q&A and let us know what you do. But yeah, curious to understand if you guys see that as a missing piece, exactly how people are doing that at the moment. While the answers are rolling in there, let's move on to some of those problems. I'll stop sharing and we'll summarize it, I guess, a little bit at the end. But Dish, in terms of, let's focus specifically, I guess, on that follow-up piece. I've heard you talk about things like there might be small problems that I guess can escalate. What are some examples of things like that?
Yeah. So I think actually one of the beautiful things about patient care and about follow-up is when you do this process, what you're pretty much doing is you're you're preventing those small issues from turning into big problems. You know, you're getting ahead of the curve and preventing any major issues. So one of the stories that recently happened to me was when a patient was overcharged. So, you know, the patient had a general, you know, clean and checkup done, and there was a promotional price that was listed online. But when they came in, you know, there was a miscommunication with the receptionist who was training, and by mistake, this patient was actually charged the full price as opposed to the promotional price. And I think that when something like this happens, patients don't usually say anything at the time. You know, they don't want to create a scene, or they're just a bit shy or nervous. So the patient paid and left. But luckily, because we followed up, they were able to give us that feedback, you know, that this mistake had been made, and she was able to convey her disappointment in that feedback, which we were then, you know, straight away able to get back in touch with her and remedy the situation. And it's not only that we're fixing the mistake that we made, we're showing that we are attentive, we are caring about, you know, what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, and we're, I guess, acting on the things that we're doing and acting on our mistakes. I think that was a really prominent one that stood out for me recently.
Dave, have you had similar experiences?
I have. I was just thinking about all the similar experience, but I had exactly the same case just recently where someone overpaid, and you just want to find out as soon as possible, and then you can get on top of it. And that patient that I was thinking of gave us a 5-star review within a week of giving us a very poor review through the system. But another example I was thinking of is a little bit more just of a lively issue, if you like, for dentists, and that's being sued. And I recently had a patient who I only saw a handful of times, just a treatment for. I did an extraction for this patient. And at the time, they wrote a lovely Google review, but 2 years later, they changed their Google review from a 5-star to a 1-star, and wrote a whole paragraph about how nasty I am. And I mean, look, if any of the Eagle Eye web people can go online and look for it, it won't be hard for you to find me in London. But the lovely thing was that I had documented each of those visits that he'd come to. I documented the fact that I'd checked on him after each of those visits, and in that process, he had thanked me. He had written a similarly large blurb, but into the system to say thank you and saying how wonderful a dentist I was. So really, for me, one of the most powerful things of checking on your patients after each visit is to make sure that they're okay, to genuinely make sure, and then to understand that actually now they've documented it, not just you documenting in your notes. And it's a discussion that I'm having now with some of the medico-legal providers here in the UK, and that's around the idea that we write patient happy, or at least when I studied 25 years ago, after every notes, I'd write patient happy. And that's documenting the fact that the patient left the visit happy and they were content with the experience. The problem with that is that it's a two-sided story, and the patient's leaving has their own view of whether they're happy or not, and you have your view, and you've documented it, but we haven't got any documentation of whether the patient was happy or not. And so by being proactive and actually documenting the fact that they're happy as they leave after every appointment, or if they weren't happy, they didn't respond, or if they didn't respond, then, you know, it's almost as good. It just ties a very neat bow around that appointment, and you know that you're safe and that you're protected. So there is a medico-legal incentive for us as dentists to do this as well. But it's just logical, you know. If by checking on your patient the day after, we know that protects us. And Josh, that only happened to me very recently, and it was actually quite a shock because the patient was just so genuinely thrilled after their visit. But unfortunately, 2 years later, they changed their mind and decided to write about it online. So that's not a very nice thing when that happens. And being able to go in and read the patient's documented words of the nice things they said, just, you know, I no longer have an issue there.
Like putting the legal stuff aside, just like peace of mind as well, knowing that you have that, I imagine. Like
it's all peace of mind. Yeah, I think probably we're all going to get sued at one point, but I'm hoping not. And just having peace of mind that, you know, I've done everything that I can to protect myself and to document the patients and make sure they're happy, and that's really crucial. So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Dish. I was just going to say, it's not all negative things, though, is it? Like, I'm lucky enough. I've never
Definitely
had.
not.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, it's on the third dot point here. I guess missing the opportunity for positive feedback and positive reviews. I'm lucky in that, I've never really had a negative experience at the dentist. Talking from a patient's perspective now, but and this is this is a true story, which seems staged because of the timing. But I was chatting to a friend of mine. Again, this is from the patient side. Um, Last week, and he was telling me the absolute agony that he was in prior, and he called up the dentist. He ended up needing a root canal, but and I was speaking to him the day after his first appointment. He's having a beer, actually. I don't know if that's recommended, but regardless, and he was ranting and raving positively about how his pain had gone. He could not have spoken highly enough of the treatment that he'd received. And me, obviously working in this role, I kind of asked, did you call them back, or did they call you? He said, yeah, I had a missed call. I wasn't going to pick it up, but wasn't actually prompted. So that's an absolutely raving, stoked patient that they have on their hands there, that they're not, certainly hasn't left an online review, but also they missed out the opportunity to, I guess, feel good about themselves or get that really, really, really positive feedback as well. Of course, if he changes his mind in 2 years as well, which I doubt he will, but you get that piece of it as well. So there are positive aspects, I suppose, to reaching out on the feedback as well. It's not just protection or avoidance of issues.
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. I think that this was one of the points that I wanted to discuss as well. I kind of named it hidden Google reviews. One of the things that practices are always searching for, always, moving toward, is to increase the number of Google reviews that they have. And most practices have a really big base of loyal patients, patients that love the team, they love the service, they love the dentist, they love everything about the clinic. But the issue arises that if you don't actively follow up with these patients that love you and love everything that you do, and if you don't actively ask them to give you that review, then they're not going to do it, because they're not thinking about the business. They're just thinking about how great you are, but they're not thinking, look, if I left this review, that's really going to help them. So if we don't take that initiative, and this is why that follow-up step is so important, if we don't take that initiative to be like, hey, Mrs. Jones, we know that you're a loyal patient and you've been with us for a long time. Do you mind sharing your experience over the past decade online? If you don't ask that question, there is a whole host of Google reviews that are just waiting, and it's completely untapped. It's completely untapped.
Yeah, I really, sorry, Josh.
No, you go, Dave, please.
I guess we have a little bit of a lag here between Australia and London, but actually, it's actually remarkably good. But I just want to highlight something you mentioned there, which is love and loyalty, and it's something that we did some work last year to look at the average sort of loyalty score. So when we collect feedback with the FollowApp system, it's a measure of customer loyalty or patient loyalty in this example, called Net Promoter Score, and the average score for in this metric for a well-performing business is around, if you think of Apple, for example, the average Net Promoter Score for Apple is 60, which is really good and very high. And most of us think that dentists, we're not very liked. We're not liked as a profession. We often hear patients coming in and saying, "I hate the dentist." We've all heard that, and we say, "Well, no, you hate the dentist, but I'm a person. Let's meet together." And we're all able to break down that barrier. But we looked and we measured what was the Net Promoter Score from patients. And it's actually been reported as very low in the press most often. And so as dentists, we just think that's an issue. But actually, and we looked at about 350,000, 400,000 responses across the UK and Australia, the average Net Promoter Score was 86 or 85.9 or around that point. And that's just remarkably high. And what that tells us is that our patients genuinely love us. I mean, love is a strong word, right? But they genuinely, and we all know this, people travel across the country, they travel across the world to go back to that same dentist that they trust. So they hold their dentist trust in very high regard. They care about that relationship. They don't want to damage it. So it's, it's not nothing. It's good to get that feedback, and then it's good to take those patients who love you and like Dish said, give them the opportunity to help you and help you promote your practice, and so you can do more great things for other patients around them. So yeah, I just want to,
yeah. It sounds like if there's a practice out there that has eight online Google reviews, and let's say they're all 5 stars, not necessarily an indication that you have 8 happy patients. So there's probably, maybe think about it that way, there's probably quite a few more than that, I imagine. Just on this issue, I guess, of problems, like we've talked a little bit about the missing step and now some of the things that can arise from that. Really keen to hear, and we'll maybe tie this back together with poll 1, but interested to hear if we chuck up poll 2, if, and I suppose how often people are experiencing things like this. We've listed a couple of examples there, but perhaps you have others as well that pop into your mind. But please share with us, like, are you experiencing these issues from small issues that perhaps escalate? And we'll get some answers on that as well. While we wait for those, as I said, we've talked about the problem and some of the issues that as we see them. But Dish, you took, like as you mentioned, this was like a key strategy for you to help you grow. You took matters into your own hands and decided, hey, I'm going to fix this. Can you tell us a bit about how you tried to tackle the problem?
Yeah, I'd love to, Josh. So I'm not very tech savvy. So, once I had kind of identified that, okay, there's a problem here, there's a step missing, I wanted to try and figure out how I can solve it. But my solution, which is going to be different to David's, which you're going to hear soon, my one was a very manual solution. So I knew that I needed to have an open communication channel with patients. Right, that was something that was very important, and it had to be an open communication channel after the patient left. So we only have 3 options, right? The first option is that you call the patient. A lot of practices do this, and it is quite a viable one. But like you said, Josh, your friend didn't want to pick up a call from an unknown number, so that's a problem that we face a lot. And when you're busy and you're in meetings or you're driving, calls don't always get answered. So that was option 1. Option number 2 was an email, but let's be honest, we hardly check our own emails. They keep building up, let alone answering an email from a dentist. So that was kind of out of the question. And the third option, which is what we ended up going with, was a text. So I decided that, all right, text was going to be my pathway, or my method to get to patients, because it's quick, it's easy, and you can get a quick response as well. And there was a few things that I wanted to achieve with, I guess, my strategy. The first thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that when I'm communicating via text with my patients, everything is personalized. The text messages that I used to send to patients, it wasn't like a bulk message sent out to all of the patients. It was specific messages to specific patients. So I made sure that I included their name. I made sure that I included the dentist's name, and even included the treatment that the patient had. So that was one thing that I did with my text messages. And the second thing that I did with my text messages was I made sure that after I got positive feedback, I included a link to action. So I copy and pasted my Google link, which is kind of the link of the website where they click on the number of stars, and I sent them that link. So if they gave me positive feedback, I would say, hey, great to hear this. If there's any issues, let me know. And by the way, if you wouldn't mind, can you please click on this link, which will take you straight to the Google review page where you can, share your thoughts on Google. So my method really was personalized communication and giving them a link. But, down to bread and butter, I had my receptionist pretty much on the phone, on her iPhone, not her iPhone, but the clinic phone, texting every single patient that came in the day before.
What happened?
Well, it was fantastic. It worked really, really well. Soon we're going to talk about how it went to the next level. But at the start, I thought it was brilliant because we got really, really good feedback from all of the patients. They were all really happy to get the check-in text. This was something that they'd never really seen before. A lot of our patients, they were so surprised because, they've been going to the dentist for decades, but they've never seen anything like this before. And the link worked beautifully as well because the patients were primed. They just replied and said that, hey, I'm really happy with your service. And then right after that, you just send them the link and it's easy for them to click onto, go straight to the Google review page. So the number of Google reviews that we were able to get with this strategy, absolutely skyrocketed. And I think one more thing that I wanted to mention before I hand it to you, David, is that I really made sure that we messaged every single patient. Most clinics do send messages out when it comes to the big treatments, whether it's a crown or a root canal or a surgical extraction, but there aren't many clinics that message every single patient. So that's something that I really focused on with my strategy. And the reason I guess that this was so important, even for the small things like cleans and even for the small things like checkups, is that although it might seem nominal to us or it might not seem like a big deal, it's just a clean appointment, you're doing so many of those a day, our patients don't feel the same. So many of our patients, because they're so nervous or because they're so anxious, they've spent weeks and weeks, even months, being scared and fretting about their clean appointment. So when they have that appointment and then they get that check-in, it's our duty to handle even that appointment with just as much care and just as much, empathy and respect as some of the bigger appointments. So I guess in a nutshell, that was what I did. I was literally texting patients every day to check in on them.
It's funny you say that. Sorry, Dave, to jump in. It's funny you say that. Just looking at the poll results now, we basically had a majority on both answers of about 65, 66%. Firstly, when it was when do you follow up?
I see. Yes.
Yeah. So it was when do you follow up? And by far the biggest response that we got was it depends on the treatment. So it sounds like different strategies there. And then when we had a similar kind of percentage come back for how often do you see issues, which was, occasionally, like we do get them, it's not constant, but it's certainly not never. So we do see those issues as well. I'd love to see, I guess, I'm going to have to go away and put those side by side and see how many hey, we do it different follow-up for different treatments and then see if we do get occasional issues. But going back to the issues that we cited before, like things like overcharging or, nervous patients who would appreciate a check-in and things like that. Dish, you're telling me that that's not necessarily specific, and David, love your thoughts as well, not necessarily specific to having an extraction or having something major done or, going under or whatever it is. It can be across the board.
Yeah, you can have someone have a bad reaction to tooth whitening. We lost a very influential patient once because we did the wrong type of tooth. Hygiene cleaning can be overzealous. Often managing your hygienist can be a real challenge. It can come from everything. And as I looked at that second poll, Josh, I was thinking about the way we do risk analysis within FollowApp. And you really need to put the problem alongside the impact, as everyone knows. So these are problems that maybe have a low risk of happening. They don't happen that often, but they have an oversized impact on your business. If you can have someone who's going to start writing nasty things online, or you end up getting sued, or you're all of a sudden all of your practice energy is going into solving this problem, which has escalated to, out of control. It's all about solving problems early, and that's why we vary that strategy, that communication strategy, where we're flexing up the resource that we have versus the risk of a negative outcome, and hence where people tend to call after surgeries and they call after large treatments, but not so much after your regular day-to-day appointment. So
on that, I suppose, like, I think the question immediately jumps into the mind, right? Is, well, every patient after every single visit, do the patients like that? Like, if I come in for a check and clean, do I feel like I'm spamming the patient? And I guess, and this might tie into maybe some of the issues that you saw with that process you initially came up with, Dish, but it's like, how do we do that? Do we have time to do that? Are those the main reasons you see people not do that? Or in your mind, what's the blocker?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's just to briefly talk about the spam thing that you mentioned there, Josh, is What we found, and I can understand why a lot of people might think that, patients are going to think that it's spam or it's too many texts, and things like that. But what I found is that almost all patients loved it. When you introduce something new and something revolutionary like this, the reality is you're not going to be able to keep everyone happy. So, 1 out of 100 people, might have a negative reaction to it, and that's expected and that's normal. But the other 99 people loved what you were doing and wanted more of it. So it's definitely not something that should dissuade you. I think that almost every patient that you will see, if you start checking in with them, following up with them, you will have a positive outcome. But yes, there was problems, and one of the problems that we mainly faced was it's too much time. Your front office is already so busy with the phone going off and referrals to do, patients walking in that you need to communicate with, patients that need payment to be taken. So with all of that going on, how can you spend time sending 20 different text messages to 20 different people who got 20 different types of treatments, and then on top of that manage the responses and send the links? So it was just too much of a time drainer. That's the biggest issue that I had with my manual system. And the other thing was it was very, very easy to make a mistake. You get one number wrong when you're typing in the number, and you don't even send a check-in message, or you don't see the appointment slot properly and you send a patient who only had a clean done. How'd you go after your extraction? That can really freak a patient out, and making a mistake like that is often worse than just not sending anything in the first place. So I think those were the two biggest problems that I found.
Did you discontinue that process, or even with those kind of little things around with the extra time and the potential for errors, was it still worth it in your mind to
To
go
be
ahead?
honest, we were really vigilant to make sure we weren't making the errors, but it wasn't so bad that we needed to discontinue the process. The benefits outweighed the negatives by far. So the amount of Google reviews that we were getting and the amount of positive feedback we were getting from our patients was far outweighed, the small mishaps and the small mistakes, we were able to pick up on quite quickly. But once we delved into patient care and follow-up, and Dave's going to talk about this soon, but once the automation kicked in, it was a game changer.
Dave, blow me away. So firstly, I guess, did you have a similar journey to Dish where there was a little bit of trial and error there, or you tried different processes? And how did you settle on automation?
Well, so follow-up, the idea of follow-up came many years ago. Like I said, it's over 10 years that follow-up's been going. And it came from the classic view of follow-up. I had a patient, we did a surgery, it was an implant and an osteotome sinus lift. And that patient had a difficult recovery, and she went on to develop chronic pain syndrome, which she had already. We tried to mitigate, but it spiraled after that appointment. And so at the time, I wanted an app in her pocket, an app in my pocket to be able to connect, so I could proactively get her pain scores and then give her advice, rather than her coming in to the practice saying, yes, it went up this day and then it went down, and then I tried this, and then, I had that. This is sort of before remote patient monitoring, if you like. That was the original idea, and we initially started it by sending out emails with a link within the email. And then there was the Ebola pandemic of 2014, and we heard about that, and so we're thinking about Africa. Genuinely, this is how it came about. And we thought, well, what about text messages? We could use text messages because that's really popular in Africa at the time, in the mid 2010s. And all of a sudden, basically, like Dish said, we got a great response from emails. People loved that. It was enough. But when we started sending out text messages, we doubled or did 2 to 3x on the number of patients who we engaged with. And then we started to unpick what that meant. Just by the way, we gave up on the app in their pocket, app in our pocket early on, because we realized there were too many steps for the patient to be going through. But essentially, that was such a big problem for me, that single patient but developing a chronic pain syndrome. It was so awful to watch. It actually, and it's funny, I'll tell you that story now, but it's the same kind of concept, that it only has to happen once, but it's a big oversized impact on that person, and we care about our patients, and it can have oversized impact on your business, other things. So yeah, so from there we went to text messages, and we actually haven't gone back away from text messages. We looked at WhatsApp and other ways of contacting our patients, but in terms of cutting through the noise and getting people to open that message, text messages have continued to be the best mechanism there. So the solution that we developed was initially just around how do we automate sending out those messages, and sending out a personalized message, exactly as you described, Dish. This is why it was so funny when we first met, because we basically described each other's solution. We came up with exactly the same thing, except we were trying to automate it. So how do we link that into the practice management system? How do we pull data from the PMS so we know what treatments have happened, and then start sending out messages that are related to that? And it sort of went from there. But what we realized is very quickly is that when you do start genuinely following up with all these patients, you get feedback back from them. You know, they do engage. We want them to engage. So then we had to create the system that made it really easy to respond to the questions. And the questions are very common and the same. And so we developed these sort of one-click buttons so that you can just press a button and it automatically sends back. You can communicate through the system. So a lot of the heavy lifting is not on the automation of the messages sending out side. It's on how do we gather that data? How do we make it easy for front of house to respond? One of your team, actually, Josh, summed it up beautifully. The system essentially tells the reception team what they need to do, so you don't have to keep training the reception team. You know, Dish's challenge was because he had a new person on reception. This sort of does it automatically, so you don't have to keep training. There's consistency in the way your customers or your patients are managed, that keeps you protected and keeps them safe and looks after your business. So yeah, and that's something that we continue to develop, is how can we make that easier? How can we make the analytics that come out of it, make it better for running your business, managing your associates, if you have associates working for you, or hygienists or other team members. And that's really where it's come from. And the benefits just, they're just, we've discussed all these problems already, but the benefits just keep coming up, where you're protected, you've got peace of mind, you know your patients are looked after. You've got that automated generation of Google reviews. Well, there we go, you've got them all. But this is something, it really depends on where you are and what your job is. For the reception team, they love it because they don't get inundated with phone calls or random emails or a text message late at night saying I've got a problem at 5 o'clock on a Friday. You know, because patients have all been checked on at 9 o'clock that day, that makes it easier for them to manage the schedule. And yeah, improving the care quality outcome. It's funny that's right down at the bottom, but that was the driver for creating this. And you know, it really is just, if you take care of your patients, you make sure your patients are happy, they'll take care of you, they'll make sure your business grows. So I think, you know, it's quite obvious that, you know, that's how you grow a good business, is delivering great quality care.
Yeah, these are in no particular order, by the way. I should stress.
No, of course. I don't mean that, of course.
Dish, so look, we've buried the lead a little bit here, or I think we've hinted at it pretty strongly, but you moved to automation as well. And you named the two problems, or two of the major problems that you saw before, is just the sheer amount of time and then the potential for errors and things like that. This is a very leading question, but did automation make those disappear, or can you tell us about what that changed?
So, you know, this whole thing, and the way that I kind of got involved into it as well is because I was actually, you know, at a roadshow presenting, and I was talking about my strategy and what I was doing, you know, and we had a team member from PatientCare there who actually saw my presentation, and as David said, it was like, this is the exact same solution, but one is manual and one is automated. So we were all picking up on the same problems, and the automation aspect of PatientCare and FollowApp was an absolute game changer. So it's one of the things that I love about it. PatientCare is beautifully integrated into Dental for Windows. So PatientCare already knows what procedure the patient had done. So it reads the item codes. It knows whether an extraction was done, whether a root canal was done, whether it was a crown or whatever it was, a clean. So when the text message gets sent out, it already has the treatment written there. And the questions that the patients get asked are also different based off what treatment they had. You know, a whitening case, for example, they get asked questions about sensitivity. A person who has an extraction gets asked questions about the healing of the socket and things like that. So that part was good. Obviously, because it's integrated, it also knew the name of the dentist. You know, it's important that the message is from the provider, the name of the dentist, and it obviously knew the patient's name as well. So that it fully automated the job of the receptionist who had to look through every single file and note all of these things down. That part was fully automated. So that was something that just took it cut everything in half, less than half in terms of the time it was involved, because now all we need to do is actually, to be honest, we don't need to do anything because it's automatically being sent out. So the only thing we need to do is review their feedback and click on one or two buttons to send a Google prompt.
And addition, even that, there are ways for the system to be set up so that it automatically filters out the happy reviews, and you can monitor those in your own time, and it just alerts you when there are negative reviews.
Yeah, and I think that the Google, sorry there, Dave, the Google review link is actually such a major game changer as well. I think that one of the biggest barriers for people to leave a Google review is that sometimes it just takes too long. You know, if you just send them a message asking for a Google review, they have to open Google, they have to type in your name, they have to click on the clinic, then they need to go to the GMB section and click on the reviews button and then give you the stars and post. So all of these steps acts as a barrier. You know, it's like, oh, this is going to take 5-10 minutes by the time I finish this. But because FollowApp and PatientCare sends out that link, they literally just need to click one button and it takes them straight to the Google review page for them to leave a review. So just the whole automation process just made it so much easier for the patients, which means that they're more willing to give us the feedback.
Awesome. I'll put you on the spot here. We're coming to the end of our allotted time. I'll put you on the spot here. We've talked about the process and I guess problems that we now don't have and the benefits of automation. Tell me either in one sentence, I'll give you two options, one sentence or 2 to 3 dot points. Tell me about impact on your business from implementing an automated or from having a follow-up strategy, which you identified as a missing piece for a lot of people, and then automating it.
Was this for me or for David?
It was for both of you.
So in a couple of words, for me, actually, and this is what I mentioned at the very start, it's enhancing the patient experience. That's what all of this is about. It's about making sure, at the end of the day, we're not doing this just so we can get more Google reviews. We're doing this because we genuinely care about our patients and we genuinely want to make sure that our patients are okay and that we're doing the right thing. So it's, for me, FollowApp and PatientCare is all about taking care of our patients and enhancing the patient experience.
David?
Peace of mind and team management. The Google reviews are wonderful. They're a wonderful bonus. But having peace of mind, knowing that every patient is checked on, every patient's okay, that just gives me a huge peace of mind. And in terms of being able to see the reviews for different team members and particularly new starters, and just reassure you when they're doing well. Otherwise, the way we gather feedback in dentistry usually is we have an oversized emphasis on negative feedback. So we're looking out for, Mrs. Smith left a bad review. Mrs. Smith called up, she's really unhappy. That's usually where it starts. And so we're all focused on that negative. You don't realize that Mr. Smith was one of 100 patients and 99 were thrilled, and here's what they said. So yeah, peace of mind and managing the team.
Yeah, I think that team management aspect is a really important thing, David, because as owners, if you've got a few clinics or you've got a lot of staff members and a lot of dentists working, we don't always have the time to actually oversee each and everything that everyone's doing. But because we get all this feedback from FollowApp. And it's not only that we get the feedback, the dentists actually get that feedback as well. Like, you know, we can have it sent straight to the dentist, I believe. And all this information gets amalgamated into a report, which the dentist gets. So the dentist has buy-in, you know, they themselves can see, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? What do the patients like? What do I need to improve on? So it's almost, you know, the dentists actually get to take charge of their own professional development, because they get to grow and they get to improve and know what they're doing right and wrong as well. So, and that's not only for the dentist, it's also for the other team members. You know, they also get the feedback. You know, they maybe a patient mentioned that the suction was too rough, or you know, that the glasses weren't as clean as they should have been. So everyone in the team, you know, things like this really foster the culture of continued improvement, because we're always looking back and seeing, okay, what did we do wrong? How can we improve?
Continued improvement. That's how you do that. I talk a lot about that, but I don't know if I do it as much. But that makes sense, Dish. Appreciate it. Awesome. Thanks, guys. I suppose we'll throw it open. We've got a couple of questions in here, but if anybody has anything top of mind, please flick it through and we'll try to answer in the next 8-9 minutes. I think we are able to stay on. But I suppose just to wrap things up, I really appreciate your time. We'll chuck up our third and final poll here. Obviously, from our perspective, the idea today is we really dialed in on the follow-up process, and that's because I guess we identified that as what we think is a missing piece and something that will really be helpful to people. So we'd love to know. Please leave us some feedback. We'll put up poll number 3, which I guess is based around, was today helpful, and will you make changes based on this, or will you consider it? So please let us know to help us in the spirit of continuous improvement, to be able to keep making these as on point as we can. I'll also, just before we go, I'll chuck up a slide here as well. If you do want to see what we've talked about PatientCare here, if you do want to see what it looks like from the patient side, but I'll put up a QR code in just a moment. I might just squeeze through. There we go. Put up a QR code. If you scan that QR code, you'll get a prompt that'll actually send you a text, so you can experience what it looks like from the patient side. So it's not just in theory, you can actually see it as well. Any final thoughts, guys, before we get to a couple of questions that we've received?
I look forward to the question.
Oh,
cool.
Go ahead, David. Go ahead, David.
No, that's okay. We'll jump into questions. So first question from Diana Mastroianni. Who sees the feedback patients leave? Can everyone in the practice access it? So I'm going to take that one and assume this. Oh, sorry, Dave, you go.
Yeah, no, no. So the system is set up with permissions so that everyone. So if when a dentist logs in, they can only see their patient responses. When a hygienist logs in, they can only see their patient responses. If you're a practice manager, you can see all of the responses. If you're managing multiple practices, you can see the responses for the practicing managers. So it's got what we call enterprise permissions. So you only see the feedback patients leave relative to you. It's a really good question, Diana.
Awesome, thank you. And a question from Sally. Does the system, I'm talking about FollowUp or PatientCare here, does the system know if somebody's already left a Google review and then prevent them from being sent future requests?
So with the Google reviews, we use the Google API, which is the data interaction between Google and third-party software providers like FollowUp. And at the moment, they don't give that information. We are working on a fuzzy mapping solution, but in the end, it's a soft request, if you like. It's a thank you screen. It's not a please can you do this. It's a very gentle nudge, and patients are just used to it, and they ignore it if they've already left a Google review. So I mean, I really don't see an issue there, but we are trying to solve that so that we can lead patients either to Google reviews or actually to hygiene products and other things in the future. So we're working on a solution for that as well. It should be around very soon.
Interesting. And maybe the last one we'll get to here is from Anonymous. Do we need permissions or consent from patients to send post-treatment messages?
So yeah, I can take that one. The answer is no, just because you're not sending, you're not sending any marketing things out. You're not sending things for them to buy or anything like that. Because it's a check-in message or a follow-up message based off treatment that was done, you don't need permission to send a message to the patients.
It's implied consent. So it's implied by your presence at the doctor's or the dentist's surgery that you consent to that doctor checking on you after any treatment that they've done with you.
I imagine if we get specific requests not to follow up, that's something that we would take into account.
Oh, well, of course, there's an opt-out function. I mean, that goes back to what Dish was saying about spamming, where you don't want to build a system for the 1%, you want to build it for the 99%. And I think we have an unsubscribe rate of 0.015% or something. So it's a very low number of patients, but they can just unsubscribe and then they don't get any more aftercare messages. That's no problem at all.
Also, one less chance to, if we're doing it manually, to send a message to someone who doesn't want one, I guess, because that's done with me. Look at me uncovering value. All right, fantastic, guys. I've very much appreciated. Thank you, Sally. Says thank you for answering the question. That's okay, Sally. Thank you for asking. Just as a bit of feedback, guys, here, 84% of the respondents that we've had have indicated that, yeah, like based on today, or influenced by today, that they'll look to make some changes to their follow-up procedure. So that's fantastic. Really appreciate your thoughts. I'll throw it to you to take us out, David, and we'll follow up with everybody who asked it, and we'll catch up next time. But Dave, any final words?
No, look, I'm just very grateful to have the opportunity to speak to everyone, and thank you, Dr. Dish. It's wonderful to meet somebody who's having such a wonderful, successful entrepreneurial path and is interested in the same thing. But yes, I'll be out at the ADX in March next year. That's probably a final thought. I'd love to meet anybody. Love to meet you, Sally, Diana. Please come and say hello, and thank you, everybody. And if anyone has any questions, you can always get through to me at david.holmes@FollowApp.Care. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks,
Fantastic.
David. Thanks, David, and thanks to everyone who attended. I hope that we were able to provide some value and give you guys some ideas about how you can improve your practice.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys, and thank you everybody for attending. You'll all get the recording as mentioned. Any further questions, let us know, but otherwise you'll hear from us soon. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.